If you want to know why the Immaculate is the patroness of Spain, I'll tell you what every good soldier understands. In the darkest hours, when the kingdom falters and a man finds himself alone, it is she who lifts the spirit and preserves the honor of the nation. And if today you enjoy a holiday on her day, you should know it's because 4,000 brave soldiers made it happen. The miracle took place 440 years ago. Because Spain cannot be understood without the Immaculate, nor the Immaculate without those who serve her with loyalty. Now watch this video and you will learn about this feat.
In the coldest days of a relentless December, when the war in Flanders seemed to swallow men and hopes alike, a small group of Spanish infantrymen was trapped on an island flooded by the waters of the Meuse. But what happened in Empel does not belong to the realm of the predictable. It is one of those episodes where history pauses for a moment, takes a breath, and decides to follow a path that no one expected. This is the path that led a handful of men toward the impossible. The north wind, cutting the skin as if it were broken glass, and the Meuse, wide, dark, relentless, completely surrounding the island of Empel. There, on just a few hectares of mud, without a single natural elevation, between 3,000 and 4,000 men of the old Zamora Tercio were trapped. Without shelter, without dry firewood, and with provisions practically exhausted. In front of them, dominating the waters, Admiral Olac deployed an overwhelming force. More than a dozen ships, armed, capable of bombarding the island from any angle, and with enough supplies to last for weeks. The Dutch had dikes, ships, food, and gunpowder. The Spanish had mud, cold, and their determination. The first bombardment fell without warning. The enemy cannons, 8 and 12 pounders, made the mud tremble and raised columns of icy water that soaked the soldiers to the bone. The Spaniards tried to protect themselves behind improvised mounds, but these crumbled within minutes. The humidity ruined the gunpowder, the arquebuses misfired, the damn gunpowder was wet, and the weight of the soaked clothes made every movement a struggle. Bobadilla, in command, knew what the numbers meant. They were isolated, outgunned, and surrounded by a superior force. Olac knew it too, and that's why he sent his message of surrender. Under normal circumstances, any prudent officer would have accepted, but Bobadilla was not just any officer. He was a man of the Tercios. And his answer became a sentence: "Tell this to your admiral. Our infantrymen prefer death to dishonor." After that phrase, something changed, not in the enemy, but in the Spaniards themselves. Every number that played against them became a challenge. Every crater opened by a cannon in an impregnable trench, every icy embrace of water surrounding the island, became a reminder that they were fighting surrounded, yes, but not yet defeated. The situation was critical. There were only enough rations left for 1 or 2 days, and usable gunpowder was scarce. I swear to myself that if I get out of this, I'm going to move to Almeria, where it never rains, and men slept with their boots on so they wouldn't freeze to death. The island was shrinking, night was falling faster, and the enemy ships were getting closer. The ending seemed written. But in Empel, the impossible was about to change the rules of the world. On the night of December 7th, 1585, darkness fell over Empel like a sudden blow. The cold, which until then had been a constant discomfort, became another enemy. The men of the old Tercio of Zamora were preparing for another sleepless night. Olac maintained his iron siege. Every Spanish movement was exposed. The soldiers were desperately digging a trench to protect the wounded when a shovel struck something that shouldn't have been there. At first, they thought it was a broken plank from some ship, but when they pulled it out of the mud, wrapped in a surprisingly clean cloth, the intact image of the Immaculate Conception appeared. It wasn't an unrecognizable piece. It was clear, almost new. The murmur spread from one end to the other. The veterans, men who had seen comrades die in Breda, in Antwerp, or in Mechelen, stood still, looking at her without speaking. One of them, an arquebusier with hands trembling from the cold, murmured, "This shouldn't be here." Bobadilla ordered a small altar to be set up with empty boxes and planks. Despite the bombardment, the men knelt in the mud, not caring about the dampness soaking through their knees.
Me da, amigos míos, que de esta no...
Never before had they been so surrounded, so hungry, so close to the end. And yet in that strange silence, something lit up in their faces, a mixture of faith, pride, and defiance. Meanwhile, on the Dutch ships, the reaction was different. Some officers mocked them, convinced that the Spaniards were clinging to absurd superstitions. But their mockery didn't last long. At exactly midnight, the north wind struck with such violence that it made the ship's frames creak. Within a matter of hours, the temperature dropped below freezing. The ice began to close in first, a thin layer, then long creaks like the moaning of wood, then huge sheets joining together. Within minutes, Olac's ships were trapped, immobilized, unable to maneuver. On the island, the Spaniards dug their boots into the newly formed ice and looked at each other. The river, which for days had been their executioner, had just opened a path for them. The dawn of December 8, 1585 brought not only light, but an impossible sight. The ships are trapped. My captain Bobadilla gathered his captains and gave the order. Well then, let's not keep those Dutchmen waiting. They would advance in a tight formation with arquebusiers at the front and pikemen guarding the flanks. The ice creaked under their boots, but it held firm ahead. The Dutchmen were paralyzed by disbelief. Their great advantage, the fleet, had become trapped, as if the river itself had betrayed them. Bobadilla raised his hand and the Spanish formation launched the attack. The arquebusiers fired at close range, taking advantage of the total immobility of the ships. The pikemen rushed onto the frozen decks, driving their weapons into the planks, hardened by the cold. Within minutes, Spanish discipline prevailed, and the enemy line shattered like frozen glass. The Spaniards captured provisions, gunpowder, dry clothes, and blankets, enough to save an army that had been on the verge of collapse for days. From those moments, a phrase attributed to Olac himself remained. Does it seem, Rob, that God is Spanish for performing such a great miracle? Empel was not just an unexpected victory. It was proof that even when surrounded, starving, and pushed to the limit, the Tercios could turn the impossible into history. In the video description, you can become a Patreon member and help me keep creating content for the channel.